Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today, we're diving into a risk that affects millions of workers every day, but still doesn't get the attention it deserves: workplace noise and vibration. Despite nearly 2 decades of regulation, noise-induced hearing loss remains one of the most common occupational health issues. So why are we still getting it wrong? To unpack that, I'm joined by Gill Cussons, Director of Noise and Vibration Solutions UK. Gill is a leading specialist in noise at work, hand-on vibration, and whole-body vibration, with over 20 years' experience helping organisations move beyond compliance and actually reduce risk in a practical, meaningful way. So let's explore why noise is so often misunderstood, the common mistakes organisations make, and what good really looks like when it comes to protecting people's hearing. If you get value from this, do hit follow or subscribe. And if you'd like to suggest a guest or topic for a future episode, even if you'd like to volunteer yourself, do drop me a line. See you shortly on the other side of the intro for this Safety Roundtable session with Gill Cussons.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week, we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints, and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Safety Roundtable. We're going to be talking about a topic that affects us all to some extent, in that we've all got a pair of ears, but obviously the exposure to this is going to vary depending on where we work and things that we do. Really pleased to have a fantastic expert, Gill, to have a chat with us today. And as always, let's make this nice and interactive. So if you're watching this live and you want to fire a question into the chat, then that would be great. Or if you're feeling brave, you can go to reactions, raise your hand, and come and have a chat to Gill and I. If you're watching on the replay, then perhaps, or listening to this on the podcast, then perhaps give us a post on social media with some of your thoughts and tag Gill and I in, and we can respond to you on there. So it is very much an interactive session. The idea is for Gill and I to chat about the topic, but if you have any questions, comments, insights, then absolutely we want this to be nice and interactive. So with that said, I'll just say welcome, Gill, and thanks for joining today.
Thank you for the invite. Any opportunity to talk about noise and vibration, I can't resist.
There we go, exactly. A bit like me with slips, it's just can't help yourself. So how did you find yourself in this world of noise safety? Because that's kind of specifically what we're going to be talking about today.
I won't do the short story long. I'll do by accident in a way. Predominantly it was my experience in customer service and problem solving that brought me into the acoustic industry, where I started working for Cirrus, who manufacture the noise measurement equipment. Yeah. And I worked with them for 9 years, and there I learnt all about what people needed to do from the HSE side and everything. And I found that I was just chatting to potential customers for the equipment on how to take measurements and what they needed to do. And the back of that conversation was, and this is one of the meters you might need. We did training, and then I just thought, actually, I want to be on the other side of it and try and make things quieter. And through my background in farming, when I was at university, I spent a year as a roadie. I've worked in grounds maintenance for a year. So I find that all my, engineering, I'm a bit of a tomboy as well, on the engineering side. So I find that all of my previous roles have actually given me great grounding for understanding my clients. And so it's, sort of fell into it. But it's the engineering side, I think, and just, it's noisy. I've got really bad tinnitus myself, and I'd say from a farming background. So there's a lot of deaf farmers out there. They shout a lot.
Yes. I grew up in the countryside, so fully aware of that. I love that. I love the fact that you've kind of, been inspired by and taken stuff from all of those things you've done in your background, and it's kind of led you down this path. And I think that is, in my experience, where really great things happen is where you kind of can align your background with seeing a problem and trying to find a solution to that problem. So yeah, fantastic to hear. And we won't go into any roadie stories because we'll try and keep this PC as much as we can.
What stays on tour?
So so the title of the session that we sort of promoted was all around noise having been regulated for nearly 20 years, but in a sense we're still getting it wrong. So to start with, how big is the problem, and do organizations maybe underestimate how widespread noise-induced hearing loss still can be?
Um, yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things that is 20 years on, as you say. Hearing loss isn't, we think we've moved away. Traditionally, we think of hearing loss 20 years ago, 30 years ago, our grandparents' hearing loss through industry. People watch Peaky Blinders and they see, all the heavy, noisy stuff that happens. And then we think, oh, well, we're automated, we've got robots, etc. But the noise issues have changed, the noise sources have changed in a way, but we've still got manufacturing, we've still got engineering. A bigger thing that's come forward when we say with companies is the introduction of noise outside of workplace as well, which is
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So sorry, ask me the full question again, please.
Just sort of how big is the problem, and is it maybe underestimated?
Yeah, I definitely think it's underestimated. I think a lot of people are sort of living longer as well. It usually sort of takes, let's say we've had our grandparents' generation where we typically know that people have gone deaf and we can put it, oh, they work there and they work this, but I say we're living longer and hopefully healthier lives, but our hearing, um, yeah, is it's the risks are definitely underestimated because
Yeah,
I think a lot of people just think hearing aids are going to solve everything. And that's wrong too.
yeah. I mean, I live in London, as you know, and if you go onto the tube or onto a bus, or even if you walk down the street, I'm sure it's the same in other places as well. You see people either with headphones on blaring out music or whatever, or you see these cars going down the road, don't you, with the music so loud that you can hear them from sort of halfway up the street, and you think, wow, they don't seem to be taking much regard for their safety at all.
Well, traditionally, the control of noise at work regs, the control of noise defined, like good old chestnut, noise defined as unwanted sound. So we
Hmm.
think it's something, if it sounds horrible, it's hurting our ears. If it sounds nice, it's massaging our ears. We like the sound of it. So um, that isn't the case. And in London, Make Listening Safe campaign did a quite a good video where it was showing somebody leaving home to go to work, and even before they'd walked through the door, they'd had 91 decibels from
Yeah,
standing at the side of a train station or in the tube station and having their um, AirPods or whatever
yeah,
in their ears to actually block out the noise. So if it's blocking out the noise because they're not hearing protection, they've actually got to be quite loud
yeah,
to override the loud noise outside. And then they go to work, and then potentially they're in a call center or they're in a factory, and then they'll do the same again at home. And then if they have a life when they're younger and they go out, they might go and see a gig or something as well, or go to a cinema or something on top of that.
yeah. Yeah, so we're getting kind of bombarded by it and sort of unwittingly causing some issues to ourselves. I remember chatting to Stephen Wheatley, and he was
Oh,
talking about that, how if your headphones are so loud that it's blocking out the noise, then that's dangerous. And so I've actually stopped since then. I never um, well, I have my headphones in actually when I'm on the tube, but I never have anything playing. I just leave them in. So I listen to the music, I turn the music or the podcast on or off, as I'm getting to the platform. And then once I'm on the train, I just turn it off because I've kind of learnt that lesson, hopefully.
it just takes the edge. And that the wearing of headphones and earphones for music and things are overlapping into the workplace. Because I
Yeah.
think people think because they're putting something into their ears, it's blocking out the noise.
Mm.
And also, when people have got ear defenders, they've got their music playing underneath their ear defenders,
Yeah.
which theoretically would mean it wouldn't need to be as loud because they're blocking out the factory noise or the construction site noise, but it's still a source of noise. It's still fatigue.
Yeah.
You know, whether you've got work boots or fluffy slippers, the fatigue on that carpet is still going to wear those fibers away over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's great. It's a great analogy, actually. So people on a personal level seem anecdotally and probably in your experience much more than anecdotally to be underestimating this as an issue. What about in workplaces? Are employers genuinely misunderstanding this risk and underestimating it, or is it sort of a more of a question about kind of priorities and culture and that kind of thing?
Oh, honestly, most of the time, I think it's because noise is treated as a compliance exercise rather than a real risk that they need to manage.
Right.
Um, they'll carry out a noise assessment, issue hearing protection, and feel like they've sort of ticked that box, and that's sort of where it stops. And because, in fairness, I mean, I'm just like the two-trick pony, noise and vibration. But in fairness, there are a lot of things. You know, yourself, Christian, with the slips and trips. There's a massive amount of things that companies need to look for. So I think they're prioritizing. You can see the risk of somebody falling down the stairs and hurting themselves and getting things in their eyes and getting run over by something. And I think in people's heads they're prioritizing those risks, and sound isn't that instant isn't that instant injury. It's that long-term injury, and it's something that
Yeah.
people tend to suffer more after they've left the workplace as well.
Hmm.
So I think yeah, the actual noise sources themselves are not really seen as, it's not necessarily like something really loud, it's an accumulation of everything. So it just isn't jumping up as one of the, I say, the biggest priorities
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
companies to pick up on that, really, I think.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know those that are on the call with Jill and I, perhaps in the chat. How well do you think your organisation is dealing with this issue? Um, I won't read out any names and give
Yeah,
any
no judgment, safe
secrets away.
space. Safe space.
But yeah, let us know what your thoughts are on that. Um, so you mentioned about doing a noise risk assessment. What would be some of the more common mistakes that you see either during that process or sort of after that process in terms of how people interpret the results and implement whatever the recommendations are?
I think the biggest one would be assuming the job's done once the report's been written, if it gets that
Yeah,
far.
yeah,
I see a lot of reports that if they're technically fine, but nothing seems to change on site afterwards. Um, or sometimes you do, and it's a shame, but you get people that are really enthused, and then they might look straight at, oh, we can do this, we can buy that, or we can buy one of them, or fit that, and they haven't actually looked at where the key place at reducing the risk matters. So it might be sort of plant rooms where people spend a lot of money. But that's to make sure they're not causing a nuisance, because obviously Environment Agency comes onto site, and or somebody says this site's causing noise and nuisance and you have to stop, then that's a big issue.
yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to noise at work, people are not there.
Hmm.
So it might not be the loudest thing on your site that you need to look at. It's potentially that exposure, isn't it? It's that compared to X, Y, and Z, this area isn't as loud, but
Yeah,
you've got 50% of your workforce here. They're here more of the time, and it's still above your 85. So that sort of gets missed, and I think it's misunderstanding a lot of the products out there. So you can get, actually, a client got in contact with me this morning, and they said, "Oh, engineering, I've just bought some acoustic curtains, but we actually thought, no, let's step back and find out where we'd put these, where we'd do this, where we'd do that." And I thought that's a perfect opportunity. They've had a noise assessment. They don't need me to come and do that bit. Um, but if you think, I'm definitely not slating acoustic panels or curtains at all. They definitely have their place in
hmm,
helping reduce. noise, and there's some great ones for construction sites as well that you can put around equipment. But what you need to remember is that's affecting the environment.
Yeah.
It's like putting an LEV system behind your head. It's not stopping that dust from hitting your face and then going to that LEV system. So you might apply, you'll see on the acoustic absorbent panels, 20 dB off it, which is great. If you're at 80 decibels, 90 decibels, that's a winner, surely. But then you think, well, no, because that person's still using that whacker plate. They're still stood next to that CNC machine with whatever it is next to it. That noise isn't being reduced by those panels.
Mm.
It's just stopping that reverberant noise. So I think a little bit of knowledge can sort of go a bit disastrous, and
Yeah.
so the control's not targeted properly. And then, as I say, falling back on hearing protection, a lot of the mistakes are A, wanting to just pick one type for everybody in the entire area, which
Yeah.
even ladies, we have lots of, I'm being very, what's the word, stereotypical here, but you do need more than one pair of footwear for different environments. It's like you've got one pair of feet, but we have multiple pairs of footwear. I've got trainers and work boots and lots of areas. And Christian, I'm sure you've got the same,
Yeah.
and that's purely for the environment. Yet we're expecting to go into a workplace where you've got all these different things happening, yet one pair of ear defenders, and not even the choice always is to.
Mm.
And then clients are saying, I want only the best for my clients, my staff, and
Yeah.
then they'll get the best hearing protection ever, and then everybody's overprotected, and then people can't communicate, so then they don't wear them properly, and it just wastes a lot of people's money, and turns out it's not protecting people after all.
Yeah. So it sounds like, as in many other areas, that, as you said, I think a little knowledge can be a bit dangerous, and there's perhaps a lot more depth and breadth to this than people initially might think, and therefore, if you sort of don't do it properly, then that can cause you some problems.
Absolutely. Even just selecting hearing protection, if somebody just purely looked at the figure, the SNR figure, the single number rating value on the side of a hearing protector, that's not considering frequency or anything else. Even if somebody just looked at that number, people take it off the dBA value, and it's supposed to be off the dBc. So right from the start, people can be using the wrong number. And that's not to
Right.
mention the HSE's big focus on, is audibility still key? I mean, that's a big thing. I think it's 96% the HSE found out of the companies they visited over the last focus they've had on. Companies weren't asking or checking that people could actually hear the heck of what's going on. I mean, you've got moving, there's a lot of things moving on a construction site, isn't there? And you've got in factories, you've got warning alarms and equipment alarms, and then you've got essential instructions as well. And if people can't hear those, that's creating a lot more risk than noise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount to think about, isn't there? So if we think about going back to sort of a report and a risk assessment, what sort of separates a good one and a bad one?
For me, it starts with understanding what's actually causing the noise, not just how loud it is. And I think once you know that, you can target it properly. And then and those fixes are usually practical.
Yeah.
So the HSE on Monday actually did a really good presentation on consultants' reports and the failings that they found. And I knew they were bad because I come across them all the time, but they pulled some great ones out there. But I think the main thing is being something that people use. That saying where they say that what's the best exercise I can do, and it's like something you'll just do.
Yeah.
I think the best noise assessment is it's something that people will understand, and at least it's got the right advice. This is setting aside incorrect advice aside.
Yeah.
But it's and I say the fixes are quite practical, and I think even if somebody isn't confident with the controls and things, you can still identify if something's rattling. You can still identify if something needs oiling. You can still identify if something's doesn't sound quite right compared to what something is. So there's a lot of things that can just get done that could be highlighted in. And the reports really do need to include, if that's what the scope has been, an action plan. But
Yeah.
based on not based on the noise levels of things, but based on the exposures of people. So
Mm.
it's not an action plan for that big machine over there that nobody ever goes near that's 100 decibels, but the area where it's just over the action value, but people spend most of their time. And I think that's where that sort of priority moves. So I think
Mm.
when you've got that source control and understanding the noise, there's issues in the exposure, that appropriate PPE being actioned, and yeah, guidance on training as well. I think people need to remember that a good noise management in place would include explaining to the staff why this is done. Because again, we just think, well, that's really loud and I'm not near that. And compared to that machine, this isn't loud, and people start making their own judgment of what we think's loud and what isn't.
Yeah.
Sort of explaining, if it sounds nice, it can still be an issue. It could
Hmm.
be quiet, but you're there for 8 hours, and how different people perceive different noises. So I think when you've got those three things together, it can noise management can sort of start working properly.
Yeah. 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 So, using that analogy or example you gave of one machine super loud versus another one that's just over the threshold, but you're next to it all the time, and is it the length of time? I guess it's both, but are more issues caused by the sort of length of time that people are exposed as opposed to the sheer volume of shorter, sharper noise?
When you're trying to manage the noise, you would definitely look at reducing the noise first before reducing the person's sort of time in there. Um, because then you've managed it, haven't you? You don't have to start managing. There's different controls of elimination, isn't it? The hierarchy of control. So if you can
Yeah.
reduce the noise level to start with, that 3 decibel, um, I think most people might be familiar here that decibels are in a logarithmic scale. So if you reduce the noise by 3 decibels, you've actually half the risk. So it's a bit of, to answer your question, Christian, it's sort of a bit of both. If you've got something that's say 100 and go into a place where there's a big generator or something, you're easily looking at just over the 100 decibel mark.
Yeah.
You are looking at just a few minutes and you've got the equivalent to your daily dose with that. Not to mention
Mm.
then you go out and do X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's if you're not protected. But that gets missed because people think it's only a few minutes I'm in here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I use the analogy, if you're in a really heavy rainstorm, an umbrella works really well until you just move it for a few seconds and you don't just get a little bit wet, you get really wet. So if you're exposed to that without, any protection or anything, that is quite impactful. But
Mm.
likewise, the noise can be below 85, 83, but if people are there full shifts, so they're doing 12-hour shifts, which can get quite common where there's deadlines and in production environments, that equates to 85. So I think sort of people picking up tools here and there, they sort of miss that accumulative exposure as well. But a lot of
Mm.
people
Mm.
underestimate hand tools because they're small, but their power can be mighty. So just a drill, if it's drilling into something pretty hard, not always just sheet metal, that can be in the low 90s,
Yeah.
which usually surprises. Impact drivers, I think we've all heard
Hmm.
people when they're in the street, the guys um, using the rattles for the knuckles on the scaffolding and how loud
Yeah.
that echoes. And you'll most commonly not see people wearing ear defenders because that impact wrench that they're using won't be loud to what they're typically compared to used to on
Yeah.
a construction site. So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
It's
haven't
when you
really.
start thinking about it, it's everywhere, isn't it? So yeah, hence why it's good to have you on and have a chat. There's a question here from Amar in the chat, which is, would you recommend that we don't wear headphones at work if we can avoid it? I have a number of Teams meetings daily, and I worry that a constant level of noise straight into my ears could be harmful.
If you're in an office environment, so a lot of headphones and are not going to be too loud. Um, you can have certain settings. A lot of modern ones as well. If you turn it up loud, they'll actually have a warning. But providing a good judge would be to ask anybody in the office, can they actually hear through your headphones? And that's
Yeah,
usually a sign it's sort of quite loud. So that's a good indication. But providing you don't have it too loud and you're not listening to sort of music throughout the full day in between, then that should be okay because it's, the music the team meeting shouldn't be too loud to start with. And a lot of headphones have um, sort of settings in there as well where they can sort of limit if you go
yeah,
into the instructions of them a bit. So if it's periodic and in the office environment's quite quiet to start with, you're not competing with that, then you should be okay. But always have it a little, if in doubt, just nudge it down a little, just one would be
yeah,
good. And
yeah.
you'll find that your hearing can actually deteriorate through the day. So I don't know where you've experienced, you maybe start nudging up your speakers over the day. That's where your ears have gone a little bit numb from what you've been exposed to.
Hmm. That's interesting. So when my kids are whining at me in the evening and I ignore it, I can just say it's because of my ears.
Temporary threshold shift. Yes. It'll be better than.
Perfect. Perfect. So we've talked about sort of measuring exposure and obviously decibels. Are there any other sort of things that people should be measuring? Are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring the wrong things? What was your experience on that?
What other than decibels? Um, you would, I think, deeper than decibels. I don't know if I'm answering your question how you intend, but other than decibels, you'd want to be looking at, say, frequency, because it's an exposure.
Yep.
So you've got the decibel level and how long they're exposed to it, which we were talking about earlier. There is the peak action values, which is where that one-off, so say um, backfiring exhaust or somebody hitting a hopper or something very loud, like a firework. There are
Yep.
peak action values where it doesn't matter about the noise environment, just that one can damage your hearing. But ideally, being aware of whether something's high frequency or low frequency, because that would then help you identify which hearing protection would be better, because hearing protection typically not favors, but its technical ability reduces higher frequency more easy than low.
Yep.
Lower frequency for those people on construction sites, that travels more. So that's more likely to annoy your neighbours.
Yep.
High frequency, like your drills and that type of thing, you can just put screens up and that can reduce it sort of quite quick. Um, but yeah, other than the decibels, but I mean, when I go on site, it's more than the decibels you're looking for because you need to
Yeah.
be looking at the entrance points. So imagine if you have a rough idea of sort of where your fire extinguishers are and your exits are, that's a good start because you think, right, this is an entry point. Is it into a loud area or is it just zonal within the area? If it's a factory area that's loud, then you would have that sign the minute you walk in on the door, and you should be wearing your hearing protection before you go in. So you'd make sure, that was all, you'd be looking to not measure that, but observe that. But if
Hmm.
you've got only certain things that are periodic, so does something start only on Mondays? Do you only run, do you only have a compactor running on a
Yeah.
Monday? Or is your job seasonal? So, everything from a company that I worked with that makes supermarket um, serve paper serviettes for Christmas. They
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
change everything because all the things are green and gold and they've got holly on them and things. So they change grounds maintenance. It's more chainsaws and chippers in the autumn. And at the moment we can't cut hedges and things, so it's starting to be the mowers and things. So just, it's not measuring decibels, but it's sort of measuring
Yeah.
how things change and if did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. So in other words, that there's a lot more to it that we should be looking at and trying to measure than just the sort of headline things, I guess, that people would immediately fall upon and probably are doing, but maybe they're missing some of these other aspects.
Yeah, I think I'd say that one of the main things as well is people, unless they're using their equipment properly to measure the level, or they're just thinking, oh, well, I'll wait until I hear it's got louder. Our ears don't detect a 3 decibel change typically, unless we're listening for it. And remember me saying that a 3 decibel increase would be a double in the risk. So for somebody to think, actually, that sounds louder, the noise will have increased by a factor of 10. So that's where our petrol pumps are going from, the difference between £1 and £10 a litre. So that's how
Mm,
much the risks increase by before we sort of think, oh, that sounds louder.
yeah,
So yeah, relying on our ears isn't always the best thing. But then again,
no,
also listening to your staff, if they think something's sounds wrong or sounds different, it's worth going and inspecting it because maintenance is sort of a key thing that causes noise issue anyway, more than
yeah, mm, yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. Got an interesting question from Sarah Jane, who's asked, which it might sound a bit, what's the word, contrarian in a sense, or unexpected. So she's asking, have any machines become noticeably louder over time? Because your assumption would be that things would get quieter and more efficient. But she works in the insurance world, so interested to think about plants and factories. If there's a insurance risk survey, should they then be following up to think about particular machines? And are there any machines that maybe are getting louder and louder rather than quieter and quieter?
well, it's a very good question to ask and a sensible thing to think about, really. But if you just think general wear and tear,
Yeah,
um, you know, I've got older, my knees are starting to make a noise. They didn't when I was 20, but they do now.
yeah,
So, and that's just that's wear and tear. So the same works for machinery. So you also have the general wear and tear through good, bearings and just the expected maintenance. But sometimes it can be lack of maintenance, but sometimes you can have those environments, say quarries or where it's very dusty, so that can really inhibit the maintenance. Sorry, the sort of smooth running of equipment because it can start blocking fans and motors. So then if motors start running hotter because the fan's not is a bit blocked, so the motor's running a bit hotter. So then if the motor's running a hotter, then the oil and lubricant inside it sort of burns away a bit quicker. So then the bearings wear out quicker, so they can start sort of squeaking and wearing out beforehand. And even in the food
mm,
environment or anywhere where there's hygiene and jet washes, that can get into a lot of the components as well, where that gets taken out sort of every day, and that doesn't get a chance to get taken back in. So um, I think the key thing is to answer the person's really good question is it would be good insurance anyway for a company business wise to keep their equipment maintained. And under the pure regs, the equipment should be, safe to use. People should, in all hand tools and equipment, and there's all other aspects of safety where equipment should be, you know, safe to use and well maintained. And I think just well maintained equipment has less breakdowns, and yeah, and say hopefully run quieter. So it sort of all helps everybody there.
yeah,
So I think if insurance were wanting to encourage to say, look, let's look at your maintenance schedules of this, and for certain things, it wouldn't hurt, but without wanting to put too much extra pressure on companies. But yes, looking after kit does keep it from getting louder.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for that, and thanks for the good question, Sarah Jane. Stuart's asked a point that I wanted to raise, which is about issues around overprotection. So he says he believes overprotection is happening far too frequently, um, with a poor selection on companies' PPE portals and then a poor selection of options, etc., etc. So it's often overspec. To what extent is that a problem, and does that something we need to fix more?
It's a massive problem. Um, Not only, so there was a study carried out as to why people didn't wear their hearing protection. And it would be easy to assume that it was down to training. They don't know the risks. And it turns out that the two main reasons were comfort and communication. Now, if people are overprotected, they're not going to hear other people. They're not going to hear the machine that they may be having to listen to. They're not going to be aware of their surroundings. And that's not a safe environment to be in. So then what happens is people then don't fit them properly. They come up, ear defenders are slightly nudged to the side, plugs are not rolled up and held in their ears properly. And then what's happening then is people are not protected from noise properly. On the flip side of that, I can definitely feel your pain with the business portals not offering a big selection because they maybe have an arrangement with a supplier and but then again, if you've got a supplier that's you're buying a lot of X, Y, and Z from, be brave and negotiate with them to say, look, you don't offer this, we need you to. But likewise, in the defense of the hearing manufacturers, well, no, not so much in the defense of the hearing manufacturers, actually, but in defense of the company portals, you seem to have to pay more money for less protection. So when you
Right.
are just above 85, there's two arguments to this. When you're just above 85, if you just get a typical, so the lowest plug on the market is about 20 dBA, I've found. Hopefully there's others that I don't know about, but 20 is the lowest I found out that's currently there. So that's 85 decibel, that's bringing people down to about 65 or 67. So HSE guidance says that's overprotecting because you shouldn't be bringing people below 70 as a rule. But what you can do is, and it's a lot more expensive for hearing protection, is you can get active hearing protection. So that is ones
Right.
where you've got, there's a microphone on the outside if they're ear defenders, and they play the sound outside. And when it's loud, you can turn the protection up so it sort of turns it down in your headset for you. And then when you're walking in between or the noise level's quieter, or in my case, when I use them, I'm walking from area to area and I've got my safety colleagues sort of saying, now we're going into this area and I'm trying to listen to what they're saying, I can do that. But on the flip side, if it's overprotecting, that potentially tells me that your noise environment isn't super loud. And if it isn't super loud, it means at possibly just above the threshold. And if you're just above the threshold, just think what you could do if you'd spent some thought on maybe reducing the noise of some areas. You could get it below that, and then that wouldn't be a problem. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not always
Yeah.
you're not going to get sites that are completely no hearing protection zone. That's probably not going to happen. But overprotection is a serious thing. And on the rail, there's been some death contributed to overprotection where people just didn't hear the train coming.
Yeah.
And likewise, if you've got areas where there's forklifts and other things moving around, last thing you want is somebody getting knocked down because
Yeah. Of
they
course.
didn't
Yeah.
hear. So yeah, it is a key thing. But as I mentioned before, the HSE said that 96% of the companies that they evaluated didn't check for audibility. So it's not just the number, people still need to be able to hear. So if you're struggling with that person asking the question, if you're finding that you're still going for the lowest attenuation level and the number says you're overprotecting, there's probably not a lot you can do there if you've looked at reducing the noise as far as reasonably practical as well. But at least check that the ones you've selected, people can still hear you. And I don't mean saying, oh, Christian, can you hear me now? I'm meaning that when they're busy away and you walk into their area when they're not expecting you and you start talking to them, they're aware that you're there, not that they're
Yeah.
in a world of their own. So that's
Yeah.
going to be safe.
Makes sense. So we need noise. We need to be able to hear, but we don't want to be in silence. But equally, we've got to just finding that balance, isn't it? And that's where measuring again is really critical. So you know what you're doing and setting that holistic system up makes good sense. There's a question here from Matthew, Jill, which is can a noise risk assessment be done in-house with or by purchasing some sound measuring equipment, or is it best to contact a specialist for this?
Well, You say specialist, right from the start, I'm going to say, Matthew, there's probably quite a few things. Well, it depends what you're trying to do. But I'd say right from today, you can probably walk in your work environment and think, that's an air leak, we can fix that. That's somebody doing that, we can fix that. So right from the start, nowhere in the regs does it say you have to use a sound level meter to do your risk assessment. Okay, so you can do a risk assessment based on your understanding. Even that sort of 2 meter rule, do you have to raise your voice? That's giving you an indication of the environment you're in. So no, you do not have to go out and buy some noise measurement equipment. If you want to do it sort of in a structured way to say, right, we need to get the noise levels and we want to work out the exposures because there's an HSE calculator that you can put the noise levels in and the time you're exposed to there and the various areas they're in, so you can do it that way. But you do need to make sure you get a sound level meter that's suitable. And that's where the standards do come in and specifying what it needs to be. There's a lot of cheap things on the market and they are just not worth the money. You'd be better off just sort of guessing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do sort of need to do it properly. But I think if you're wanting to look at some management plans, there's probably a lot you can do with common sense and you've been familiar with your own environment. But then I think if you need something a little bit more structured, you might need experts coming in. But you don't necessarily have to have the package. You might say, well, we've done this so far. Can you come in and fill the gaps for me or see what we've done or, help us out with this bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Which
So,
makes common sense. Yeah. Makes common
yeah.
sense.
You don't
Go on.
you don't have to take a specific qualification. That's my point, because there's people that have taken qualifications and it makes them rubbish.
Yeah.
The HSE in their their webinar on Monday, basically said the competency of the person doing it is judged on the output that they see.
Right. That's interesting,
Which
isn't it?
makes sense because
Hmm.
if they go in an area and then they're thinking that people are not wearing hearing protection or they're wearing hearing protection when they don't need to be, they're going to say, well, this person's not competent because they've recommended this when it's not, when it should be this.
Yeah.
Or these signs are not in the right place, or why people overprotect, why people got
Yeah.
these on when it's not that loud.
Yeah. Makes sense. Coming up on time, everyone. So any final questions for Gill, do drop them into the chat. There's one here sort of going back to something we touched upon a little bit before from Brian, which is what are the issues with making a relatively large area a mandatory hearing protection zone if there are only pockets of 85 decibel machinery spread around that area?
So were you saying what's the problem with doing that?
Yeah, is there an issue in doing that?
Yeah, because you're typically making the people that are assuming this is an area where there's people and only a few people are in the noisy area. You're making people wear hearing protection when they don't need to. So if they don't need to, then that's overprotecting people, isn't it? They're already in an
Hmm.
area that they don't need to wear them, and then you're putting hearing protection in. So as a quick guide, so because I know we're running out of time, rather than have a hearing protection must be worn sign prior to that area, you could put warning hearing protection zones in place. So then people have their hearing protection with them, and then you could zone those areas. So whether that's I've seen people with signs, a bit like restaurant signs before they go in, hearing protection zone. I've seen that on construction sites where people have been doing paving and things. So it's sort of portable and they move it. They've worked out the sort of safe distance that the zone needs to be. I've seen it where it's hatched the floor. I've seen it where people have had signs hanging down from rafters. And part of that's the communication with the staff as well, saying, look, we don't want you all to have to wear it, but we're going to mark this out. You need to understand that if you cross this area, you should be wearing your hearing protection. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't be blanket. You definitely shouldn't be blanketing areas if they're not needed.
Yeah, perfect. Good stuff. Last question for me, Gill, is if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about how most organizations manage workplace noise, what would that be?
How they can manage it. Don't think that it needs to be something specialist because the word acoustic, the acoustic engineer Don't be scared about that. A lot of it is staring you in the face. The biggest things that you can just do would be, so the one thing I'd love people to do is just look at the maintenance and condition of what people are using in that environment, because there would be so much you could already do to start with in-house. Use a spanner, not a sound level meter first. That's what I like to say.
I like that. I like that very much. Good stuff. Thanks so much, Jill. Really, really interesting and useful. Where can people find out more? Where can they connect with you? Is there anything particularly you wanted to plug or share with us and bring to our attention?
On my website, which is uk-nvs.com, I will be uploading that webinar from the HSE. It's out and about. The one where it says what good consultants report the problems they've come across. So it helps either if somebody's looking to decide or check what they've got is suitable. Or just direct message me. My name is LinkedIn, under the LinkedIn. But also look on the UK Hearing Conservation Association website, because there's lots of resources on there as well that cover all sorts of areas with headphones and non-workplace environments. It's Stephen and myself. We're all, Stephen Wheatley, you mentioned from the Listening Safe campaign. We're all part of that organisation. So it's a really good sort of central hub for people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jill, for joining us today. Thanks everybody who's joined us as well, and look forward to having ongoing discussions and trying to make progress in this area, and look forward to seeing everybody else for future safety roundtables in the future as well.
Super. Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.